What is up, everybody? I'm NoLuxGiven here with your afternoon snap, and in today's video we're gonna take a look at some tricky games dealing with Bar with No Name. It's a really tricky location. This deck does have some ways to make use of it, but what gets funky in this game is X-Mansion gives my opponent a Mr. Fantastic. So now they are losing in Bar with No Name. So I was planning on playing Galactus this turn, though. Do I really want to play Galactus into Bar with No Name, especially when I'm already winning that location currently? And Spider-Man plus the additional Spider-Man in my hand are really going to limit my opponent's options into the X-Mansion. So what I could do here is just, do nothing this turn, or potentially even play Doc Ock into the Bar with No Name, and then next turn play Spider-Man into X-Mansion, and then hope that my opponent isn't able to win that location with just a play on turn 5. And we'll have Daredevil Sight to even see if that's possible. But ultimately, I am going to decide to just go for the Galactus. My opponent has a few cards in their hand, and I think we can just win this game with Doc Ock into Bar with No Name to ensure a victory here. So Galactus is going to blow up those other two locations. That way I don't have to worry about anything funky going on. I just have to hope my opponent has one or two big cards in their hand. And we'll find out in just a second. Let's jump over into this Doc Ock play. And we'll see that my opponent has an Armor. Not great, because now they can't flip Shang-Chi. Then they have an Iceman, not great because it doesn't have that much power, a Bishop, which also has no power, but a Maximus to just barely grab us the win and finish my opponent off there. So, pretty sweet one. Tell me what you would do. Would you have gone for the Doc Ock, or would you have just tried to double Spider-Man in the X-Mansion? This game is all about the mind games. We are able to use Professor X to grab a win in Nidavellir, which is really sweet. The only problem is my opponent is playing a Thanos deck, so they have access to Reality Stone, which they can use to grab a sneaky win in Bar with No Name. And when my opponent snaps back here, I feel like that's probably what they have. But we are going to be able to see a little bit into the future with our Kang Vision, and with a card being played there, it does look like Reality Stone is going to be the case. They also have Blue Marvel to grab a tie in Nidavellir, so this is a little bit tricky. And now we have to decide, is my opponent, we now know that they have the Reality Stone. The question isn't if they have it, it's if they will play it, because now they might be expecting me to play into Bar with No Name, and then they get me by playing more cards in the location themselves. Now, I don't really have a way to win the game in Vormir, but I could potentially win this game with Dr. Octopus into Bar with No Name if my opponent decides not to drop their Reality Stone. So that's what I'm gonna go for. Definitely a little bit risky. I thought about just retreating here, but I'm gonna go for it. We'll drop the Doc Ock and see what my opponent comes up with, which is basically just, will they drop the Reality Stone this turn or not? And looks like the answer is not. They play Arrow and then they Reality Stone in the other location, meaning now they have lost Nidavellir, and Doc Ock also means that now they have lost the Bar with No Name. Blue Marvel will mean that now we are tied up in Nidavellir, but it means that they lose Bar with No Name even worse, and I win the game on differential. I thought this was a fun game that also fits the theme of this video. We're going to be sacrificing a bunch of stuff to the Altar of Death. Myself and my opponent, we both have rocks from Subterranea. My opponent also throws in a Time Stone there, and then I'm going to flip over a Wave and then 2 rocks of my own. So everything will cost 4 next turn, though we're both going to have a bunch of energy. So we'll both be able to play 2 cards. I'll also actually be able to play my Death, and I'm actually gonna go for it here. This is a very weird game. Because of Subterranea, I haven't really drawn that much action, and I feel like my opponent is probably in a better spot than I am, and we'll see with this Daredevil Sight that they are planning on flipping over a Leech and a Thanos this turn. So all of my cards are going to lose their abilities. I might as well just run them out here now, and we can get a little bit cheeky with it. We can play Dr. Octopus first, and then we can play Death into Altar of Death. That will explode, giving us 2 more energy for next turn, and then I can flip over Galactus. And I'm throwing all of this stuff into the altar because I won't have any Shang-Chi. My opponent is going to leech my Shang-Chi. So I just have to kind of hope that we can get a little bit cheeky with it and my opponent won't Reality Stone on the final turn. There's a lot of other weird things going on with priority, but this is another sort of Reality Stone will they, won't they bluff. Because if we have priority going into the final turn and my opponent has Reality Stone, then they will more often than not win. They could retreat thinking that we have like Professor X or Armor, but for the most part, or I guess like Storm or Rhino, some other way to change the location, though the most common cards in this scenario are going to be Armor and Professor X. We're going to Doc Ock my opponent, and Killmonger comes out, destroying a few more of my opponent's cards, and then we're going to sacrifice Death to her own altar before flipping over Galactus and destroying absolutely everything in the entire game. And what actually winds up happening here is that my opponent gets priority going into the final turn, which is pretty good because now it means if they have Reality Stone, they would have to play it first, and then we would have 10 energy to play whatever we wanted this turn, and that is actually enough to just scare my opponent away. I don't know if they actually had the Reality Stone or not, but they aren't going to show it to us, and we get the victory. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.